Looking for a cool wet pet to put in a 5 or 10 gallon aquarium that isn't a betta fish? Then I've got 5 suggestions you're gonna wanna try. Hi, I'm Irene with girltalksfish, and I have a friend who came to me and she's trying to set up a nano tank, and she did not want to put a betta fish in because she thought they were too commonplace and boring. And I was like, what? They've got beautiful footage and cute little grumpy faces, but okay, whatever. So it got me thinking, and that's how this list came about. First up on the list is gouramis, specifically dwarf gouramis or honey gouramis. They're very similarly sized, I would say, ranging from 2 to 3.5 inches, depending on the species, and they come in all sorts of colors. You've got kind of the regular blue and red type with the striping, the powder blue dwarf gouramis, flame dwarf gouramis, and then honey gouramis come in a kind of yellow gold color. Because they are both labyrinth fish, that means they like to take kind of gulps of air on the surface. I would say they have very similar behaviors as well. They like to kind of hang out on the upper third of the aquarium, although really both of them will swim all over the place. They can make bubble nests when it is breeding season, and then they like to eat off of the surface as well. So any kind of floating betta pellet, freeze-dried foods, or even frozen foods that sink, they'll take that as well. Also, like betta fish, I would say dwarf gouramis are a little hit or miss when it comes to their aggressive nature. They're a little bit territorial. So I've had dwarf gouramis in the past that got along just fine with mollies, corridoras, even forgot a rainbow fish. And then I have others that like attacked all the albino corys in the aquarium. So it really depends on the fish, just like with bettas. Honey gouramis, I would say, are more peaceful though in general, if that's what you're looking for. Really, other than their appearance being quite different, because gouramis have that more roundish blimp shape and those cool little feeler ventral fins, their personality and behavior and needs, I feel like, are very, very similar. So in my book, the gouramis are a very close substitute to what a betta fish is like. Second on my list is pea puffers or dwarf puffers, and I actually mentioned them recently in my video about my honest review of 5 oddball nanofish. But basically they are about 1 inch long, looks like a little yellow blimp with kind of splotches all over it, very, very cute. They're also a bit semi-aggressive in nature, but you can keep them in a species-only aquarium where it's only puffers in there, and generally they should do okay if you have enough space, enough cover or blockage of line of sight, and kind of the right ratio. You definitely want 1 male to lots of females if at all possible. I also like how they just kind of have a cool personality. I find them to be very curious. They're constantly coming up to look at things, really carefully inspect them, and then the way they swim around is really neat. It's kind of like a little helicopter moving back and forth and up, everywhere in the aquarium. The main sticking point you have to be aware of would be their diet. They also like meaty, carnivorous kind of diets, but they definitely prefer live and frozen foods over prepared foods. So they're not going to be as easy to feed as a betta fish. So feed them things like live little snails, blackworms, or maybe frozen bloodworms, brine shrimp, that kind of thing. So if you're looking for a cool oddball fish to keep instead of a betta, this is a good one to try. Another cool betta fish alternative that is slightly rare, unusual, would be the Scarlet badis or Dario. This fish is about 1 inch, maybe a little bit less long as well, and they have a really bright coloration. You'll notice that they have red vertical stripes on them with some bright blue highlights, especially on their ventral fins. Similar to the pea puffer, they also prefer live and frozen foods and don't take prepared foods as easily, so feed them things like, you might have to have a micro worm culture, they like that, hatching out baby brine shrimp, maybe daphnia, or you can do the frozen versions as well, frozen daphnia, cyclops, and smaller foods for them to take. They too are also semi-aggressive. I don't know why so many fish and creatures on this list are semi-aggressive, but unlike the pea puffers, you usually can't find females to purchase very easily in the fish stores because they're drabber in color. So you can either choose to get maybe 1 male and keep him alone, or maybe keep him in a community tank that has other really small, peaceful community fish that won't outcompete him for food. Once when I was at my local fish store, I noticed there was a similar looking fish called the black tiger dario. I don't think it has an exact species name yet, but it looked really cool, kind of similar to the scarlet bass, but it was black in the front half and then scarlet red in the back half. Pretty cool if you can find it. For the next option on our list, I wanted to go with something a little different, an invertebrate, the Mexican dwarf crayfish. And it's also known as CPO based on an acronym of its species name. But this little 1.5 inch crayfish is very, very bright orange. It's beautiful to look at, and they're not shy. They're super active. So you'll get a lot of entertainment watching him crawl around in your tank. I would say they are pretty opportunistic feeders, so I wouldn't put them with any tank mates that are small enough or slow with long flowy fins that they can grab and take a bite out of. Instead, since they're mostly on the bottom of the tank, maybe look for a nano schooling fish that's in the middle or top part of the tank that swims very fast. So really any kind of tetra, rasbora, danio, they'll probably all do fine with him. As for how many you can put in one tank, I think it really depends on the size of your nano tank because they can be pretty territorial and fight amongst themselves. So make sure to provide a lot of cover and don't be too surprised if you see them lose a limb or two because hopefully they will regrow it the next time they molt. Speaking of molting, don't be scared if you accidentally see what looks like a dead crayfish in your aquarium because it might be just the shell, so pick it up and see if it's empty inside. But to encourage the growth of healthy exoskeletons, if you have soft water like me, make sure they get plenty of minerals to make that new exoskeleton. So you're going to want to add something like Cecum Equilibrium or Wonder Shell, and then feed them calcium-enriched foods such as Hikari crab's cuisine. Another non-fish species that would be a good betta fish alternative would be the African dwarf frog. And this is actually the animal that my friend decided to end up going with. So they grow to about, I don't know, 2 inches. That's usually the ones I see. Maybe larger, maybe smaller, and they're kind of brown with some spots on them. Although there's also lighter color versions that I don't know if they're albino or leucistic or what, but they look pretty cool as well. They are fully aquatic, but they still breathe air, so you'll sometimes see them jumping all the way up to the surface or sometimes floating near the surface so they can easily breathe. So make sure to keep that tight lid on the aquarium just in case. They are slower eaters, so it might be good to have a species-only nano tank with just a bunch of frogs in there, or maybe you could add like a really big mystery snail to kind of act as the cleanup crew, but make sure it's big enough that the frog can't try to eat it. Like a lot of the animals on this list, they do prefer their live and frozen foods, so feed them a meaty carnivorous diet of, live blackworms, frozen bloodworms, frozen brine shrimp, and so on. One of the cool things is that the males will sometimes sing to the females to attract them. So you may hear this kind of buzzing whine. I mean, it clearly sounds like a frog. So just don't be alarmed if you hear that because clearly you're doing something right because they're in the mood to breed. So what is your favorite betta fish substitute or nano wet pet that you would recommend? Comment down below so I can add them to my bucket list. Take time to enjoy your aquariums, and I'll see you in the next video.